going to talk. He's going to talk to us on a very interesting topic, which I know you are seeing, and I'm sure you got information for. And that's going to be on, globalizing Indian talent and India being a talent factory for the rest of the world. And the team comes with a very illustrious experience, very, I would say, global experience. He's a management executive. Currently, by the way, he's the CEO at and also the founder at Certif ID, which is bridging the global skills gap with borderless skilled recruitment. And he's a management executive with 15 plus years of international experience across diverse markets. And he's an excellent communicator with an understanding for cultural and regional differences. And he spins across a wide spectrum of business entering new markets. And he has got a very, very, very sound, I would say, very interesting the education background also. He's a BSc Economics graduate from University of Bath, one and only University of Bath. And also he has done general management program from ESMT, European School of Management Technology. And he has done his schooling from Yokohama International School. And like he said, and I've written the chat box, he has been on the demand side as well as the supply side of Indian talent for global companies. So he's going to share with us the unique perspectives of being on both sides. And I'm sure those of you who are business leaders or who are in the process of becoming business leaders will have great actionable insights from this wonderful, very insightful topic. Over to you, Tim, and thank you so much for joining us today. I think it is mid-afternoon there in Germany, and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. It's great to be here and great to be able to share some insights into, as you said, the very interesting topic of the skill opportunity and India being the skill capital of the world and what that means for globalizing Indian talent. Let me just share my screen for a second, and then I can start the presentation. 1 second. Oh, wrong screen. Hold on. 1 second. Oh, I can't see my screen. 1 second.
Sure, no problem. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Okay, let me see my screen. Okay, I hope you can see my screen.
Yeah. Yes, Tim.
Okay, great, perfect. So, as said, I'm really excited to provide some insights into the Indian talent factory and globalizing Indian talent. And India is in a unique position globally at the moment to really benefit from the opportunities that a global skill shortage around the world has, and India being in such a unique position with its large young population, educated population, and I'd really like to share some insights into what that means, what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, and how India can really tap into the wider opportunity that brings. So very briefly about myself. So as said, Tim Miller is my name. I am the co-founder and CEO of Certified International. My background, worked for many years for a German multinational company called TV Rhineland in multiple countries around the world. Always in the area of education and certification. So looking at certifying skills and certifying talent, and working very closely with the German dual vocational training model, so the apprenticeship model that Germany is very famous for, and looking at how that can be rolled out in different countries around the world, from Mexico to China, Southeast Asia, and of course, India as well. I had the benefit of living in India for a number of years, growing up also. So I lived in Mumbai at an early age. So from the age of sort of 10 to 14 or so, I was living in Mumbai. And then more recently lived in Bangalore, where I ran the educational business for this German multinational for several years, and had a great opportunity to immerse myself in all things education in India, which is a very interesting topic, and hopefully bridging that sort of background with understanding the requirements of Germany and other markets, looking to provide some interesting insights to you today. So a little bit of background on Certified E. So about 3 years ago, I decided to set up a new company called Certified D, which really looks at how technology can play a role in in bridging the skills gap, basically. So as mentioned, I did a lot of work in both developing and developed economies and saw quite a common trend. Developed economies were having tremendous challenges in filling the pipeline of talent for a huge range of jobs. So they were facing a huge skill shortage, particularly with aging and retiring populations and a lower birth rate. And then in countries like India, you have this massively growing population and a lot of people spending a lot of money on education, but obviously or honestly missing the boat in terms of exactly what that education means to industry. So really being able to reap the benefits of investing into education and getting an outcome which was really relevant to industry. And that big mismatch between industry requirements, especially industry requirements in countries which are demanding or needing skilled talent, and the educational practice that goes on in a number of developing economies was really why Certified E came into being. Yeah? So how can technology play a role? And Certified E focuses on three areas. One is creating trust in international technical recruitment, so particularly the blue and gray collar sector, engineering in particular, and then looking at enabling limitless skill-based hiring across the globe. So if there is a demand in one country, it shouldn't matter where your passport's from, you should be able to get the job if you've got the right skills. So how can technology play a role in facilitating that? And then thirdly, aggregating demand and supply of international skilled professionals. So basically, at scale, being able to provide a seamless, transparent, and harmonized process of finding people with the right skills and connecting them into jobs where there's a skill demand. And I've got one quote here. There's many that I like from Nelson Mandela, but this one I think is very relevant to India as well, is education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And I think that India has a very prestigious educational history, particularly with higher educational institutions. And there's a world of opportunity waiting for India if there are certain things that can happen within the educational space that become really and truly globally industry relevant. So why is this so important? So globally, and you may have seen some statistics on this, but globally, there's an awful lot of research that's been done about the shortage of talent on a global basis. And basically by 2030, the year 2030, it's estimated there'll be 85 million talents shortage of 85 million talents across the world, which will result in a unrealized annual revenue opportunity of $8.5 trillion. It's been talked about for a long time. There's not enough people, and there's an economic impact, and how's that going to affect different economies around the world? But basically, now there's enough data and information that really showcases that true economic impact. And as you can see, it's not a minor impact. Everybody needs to stand up and take focus of this challenge, but also look at this opportunity. There's $8.5 trillion of revenues to be made if the skill gap can be tightened and the right skilled people can be found across industries around the globe. And again, 85 million is equivalent to the population of Germany, and that's where I live today. I'm not from Germany; I'm from the UK, but lived in Germany. So again, I'm part of the global migration world. So I live in Germany at the moment, and 85 million is the equivalent of the German population. And my next slide is Germany. So breaking it down even further, and I will give a few German examples through this presentation. But in Germany, same statistics, different numbers, but still quite staggering. So German industry, the bedrock of Europe, manufacturing excellence, quality assurance, and all the wonderful things that are linked to the German or aligned to the German way of doing business. They will face a talent shortage of 4.9 million talents by 2030 with a $630 billion economic impact. And this comes because of a multitude of different things. Shrinking birth rates, there aren't as many children to fill into jobs. Changing demographics, so changing interests of younger generations in terms of the type of jobs they want to do when they're older. And of course, the German the heart of the German economy is a baby boomer generation, and that baby boomer generation is all starting to retire. And there's another very interesting stat at the moment that every day there are 1,000 people leaving the workforce in Germany alone. So I think that's today, and a really interesting statistic which showcases that honestly, the German economy has some major challenges ahead that they need to address. And the only way that that can really be done is by finding the right people with the right skills to fill the holes in the economic development sector. So looking at India, India is a hugely interesting opportunity for the globe. And what's really interesting is that Indian talent working abroad is nothing new, particularly for English-speaking countries. There's huge, Indian populations in the UK, US, Canada, Australia, and multiple other markets, which has been going on for hundreds of years. And when you look at some of the biggest companies around the world, they're either run by or built by or economies that have been developed by Indian talent. So there's nothing really new. And so what is new is that countries that haven't been exposed to the opportunity that Indian talent brings are suddenly waking up and joining the party. And they're saying, okay, how can I understand how to tap into the Indian talent ecosystem, and how can I, gain an advantage from being part of this global movement? And it's really interesting because, again, having worked in India and having worked overseas, there are many different attributes to the Indian personality that are hugely valuable in an international context. Cultural diversity. India is a massive country with many different cultures, with difference from north, east, southwest, and everything in between. Which means that Indians are aware of different cultures and how to work and operate in different cultures, and have been traveling internationally for a very long time. So it's something that doesn't need to be taught. It's an innate understanding about different needs for diversity. Technical proficiency, particularly around STEM, so STEM sectors. So the last 30 years, India has taken huge steps in building one of the largest engineering and STEM-based talent pools around the world, which has obviously facilitated such a strong IT sector, IT and services sector, which is, a huge component of the Indian economy. And with digitization and new digital skills, that digital literacy and understanding is also very prevalent within Indian society. Just as an example for that, having lived in both countries, the way that India is able to adopt new digital technologies, like, for example, the Aadhaar card or different payment solutions and so on, is miles ahead of a country like Germany, which many people find quite interesting. But Germany is in many ways still a cash-driven society that struggles to have digital adoption, and is also finding challenges in that way. So I think there's another area where, again, the ability or the opportunity to bring Indian talent to a wider market will open up those markets to different opportunities as well. Multilingualism. I haven't met an Indian, I don't think, who doesn't speak at least 3 languages, to be honest, which is a huge advantage. So the ability to learn different languages and learn them quickly, and especially with Germany, it's one of the biggest challenges of coming to Germany is learning German. But nevertheless, when you're working with a population that is aware of what it takes to learn a different language and often speaks many languages, it's a big advantage as well as being very adaptable and able to change. Things like technology adoption and so on. And in this slide, number of faces you'll know, and again, hence there's nothing new about the fact that Indian talent has a major role to play in the world. So some of the biggest economies are run by Indians or people of Indian descent. Some of the biggest companies in the world are run by Indians, and economies are being built by Indians, from the Middle East to Asia to the US and Canada and so on. So this is nothing new, and I think that this is something that often gets missed from countries that aren't aware of historical connections with India, for example. There needs to be more visibility about the fact that this isn't new. It's not suddenly opening the door to a talent pool that has appeared from nowhere. This is something that's been going on for a very long time, and incredibly successfully as well. Last one, and just why talked about the big population. So India is a massive population that is continuing to grow, and provides, again, the title of this presentation, this demographic dividend. So this opportunity that India has with such a young population, workforce ready population, that is something that very few countries around the world can say. And with this opportunity, with this talent pool size, with an existing global reach, huge amounts of innovation and innovativity within the space, opportunity and growth in the education sector, and of course diversity, it really positions India in a great standpoint. So you've got the right attributes, the right heritage of talent that's already making waves across the world. You've got this need globally for talent, and you've got this young, growing, educated population in India, all of which create this perfect mix of an opportunity to tap in and solve many of these skill problems around the world. But it's not always simple. The last one here, again, on the demographic dividend, a quote here from Dharmendra Pradhan, from India's Minister of Education and Skill Development. So India is home to 600 million people. I'll let you read it for yourself, but basically this is going to continue for a number of years, where India will continue to grow its working age population, and that won't stop until the mid-2050s. And therefore, as you see, there's just this huge workforce population that is ready to go, both for domestic development and economic development, but also for international opportunities as well. So with all these wonderful opportunities and all these, this opportunity that India has to be the skill capital of the world and facilitate all of these different opportunities, there are some very big holes in that plan that need to be filled. And part of our business, as mentioned before, we are in the process of working with companies in India to develop skill-based professionals that have opportunities to go and work in Germany and other countries around the world. And therefore, we deal with employers. And there's a big difference between government to government discussion on educational policy and alignment in terms of migration policy and harmonization of educational standards and opening doors and visa issuances and so on. And there's a big difference between that and what goes on the ground if you're dealing with a small, medium, large size company in Germany and the challenges that they have when they're looking to recruit somebody from India. And this is where I believe the major hurdles are for the Indian skill set to be able to address, and therefore to really truly take advantage of this opportunity. And I would say there are four. I think there are more, but I think there are four that I will focus on. One is industry-driven skill assessment. So again, there's a big difference today between what and sort of a degree or a diploma or an higher educational qualification gives you and what industry is looking for. And this is not just an India problem. This is a problem from around the world, that curriculum of particularly higher educational institutions needs to adapt to be industry relevant. And you've probably heard there's a big shift in sort of focus from 3 or 4 year degree programs to shorter nano degrees or skill-based training or upskilling or industry apprenticeships and so on. And this all is driven because of skills, and skills are what are most important. So what we do, as an example, again, we work with the European Skill Framework, which is the European Skill, Competency and Occupational Framework, which basically has mapped skills across job roles and occupations. So you can see, for example, if you want to be a specialist nurse in Europe, for example, there are 40 primary skills and competencies that you require to be able to do that job. Of course, you need a nursing degree. That's still a fundamental foundation, but the differentiator and the movement is to say, okay, you've got your degree, that's kind of the prerequisite, but in order to really add value to your proposition, we need to know what skills you have. What skills do you have that can really make you a valuable asset to the workforce in this hospital or in this healthcare institution? So the first one is, how do you ensure internationally harmonized skill sets from India to the rest of the world? The second one is integration and cultural awareness. Again, many economies are very familiar and have large Indian populations already, so that's a much smaller task. But again, for countries like Germany, for example, that haven't historically had a large number of Indians working in the country, for example, one of the big factors that can be brought into education in India is the ability to understand different cultures, understand how to integrate and how to be seamlessly sort of integrated into different international environments. And why this is the case is because a lot of migration is focused more on long-term integration into society, as opposed to a 2-year working stint and then come home to your home country. And that's also something, particularly in countries which have shrinking populations. It's not just about, I've got this big construction project and I need someone to come here for 2 years to build it and then they can go back to their home country. It's, I have a shortage of 40,000 nurses, and that is only getting bigger and bigger. And I need people to come into the country and live here and become German, for example, and integrate into society. And that's a big trend as well, where this integration component, if is promoted in a really strong way in India, can be a real benefit to that as well. Transparency of the Indian education system. So many people around the world have heard of the largest institutions in India, the IIMs, the IITs, and so on. There's good and strong awareness about the highest of higher educational levels in India. But in general, beyond that, it's a very gray world from an international perspective. Yeah? So if you get a number of different applications from Indian talent, to be able to understand as an international employer the difference between Institute A, Institute B, and Institute C is very challenging. And what that challenge means is effort, time-consuming, lack of trust maybe, or nervousness. Yeah. So again, that's something which is currently a hurdle in what we see in the market, is the need for more transparency about, again, the educational institution, curriculums, outcome of learning, and so on. And the final bit to that, which connects quite quickly to, or quite easily to that, is a trust. So it's transparency and then trusting in the educational qualifications. You see it quite a lot, unfortunately, and bad news travels faster than good news. Yeah, but you see, Indian students being sent home from the US because of falsified qualifications, for example. And there is, there is this inherent need to build more trust in the fact that there's no manipulation in the educational system. And that's something that, again, in combination with the other points in this list, are all sort of barriers to expansion. Yeah, they're not barriers to entry, because there's still a lot of migration that happens, but at scale, and to bring in a wider group of employers to tap into the Indian talent ecosystem, these are all things that need to be addressed. I think this is quite an interesting one, because talking about recognition and transparency of educational institutions. Yeah. So what many people would do is they would get an application. This is at high level, right? So this is higher level education, so the cream of education. But if you get an application from a different university, you tend to Google it first, right, and get a ranking or an overview. And what's quite interesting, that I find quite interesting, having seen the challenge in India of getting into some of these top institutions and having the hardest entry exams in the world, for example, but still on a global rating scheme. And I think this is the 2023 Times ranking. You can see that Indian universities and institutions still struggle to break into the top echelon of international universities around the world. And I think what's interesting here to look at is the breakdown is quite specific. So teaching and research, for example, tend to be much weaker, which doesn't mean the educational institution themselves is weaker, because they have very strong ties with industry, for example, or teaching can be on a high level. But as a whole, there's still certain gaps, which means that just from a pure a naive research onto the topic, there's still this gap. Yeah, and I think that that's something where India prides itself in its higher education, and I think there's opportunities to visibly start to bridge the gaps in terms of bringing more transparency and trust to the overarching Indian educational ecosystem. And the reason I looked at the global one is because of Germany, and coming to Germany in particular. So if you want to work in Germany and you have a certain skill set and you want to come and be, for example, a mechanical engineer in Germany, the first thing that happens is you submit your application and you submit it to an employer. An employer gives you the opportunity for an employment contract. To get your visa, you need to get recognition of your qualification, which means that you can practice this specific skill as a mechanical engineer, for example, or an automotive engineer, for example, and it has some harmonized alignment with the German equivalent of that qualification. And the ANABIN database is what it is. It's a database of colleges and universities around the world that are recognized by the Indian government in one way, shape, or form. And I won't go into all the details of how it happens. But if you look at the Indian context, and I searched here, and you can see in the screenshot, there are 132 colleges listed in this database from ANABIN from India. And that's a fraction of what exists. I think there are 900 universities and many thousand colleges in India, and 132 of them are in this database. It doesn't mean that if you're not in this database, you can't work in India, but it makes the journey harder in terms of recognition. And again, there are over 70,000 institutions in this database from around the world. And if you look at the process one step further, so you submit your application to become a mechanical engineer for Bosch in Germany, for example. You would go through this process. First step, a search of the database. Is your college or university listed in this database? If it is, great. If it isn't, there's a bit more of a process. So if it is, the authorities in Germany then access what's called a BQ portal. And this BQ portal is basically a database of curriculum from different universities around the world. So take, for example, you completed your mechanical engineering degree from the University of Delhi in 2002. Basically, what would happen is the German government would go into their BQ portal, find hopefully that curriculum of Delhi University from 2002 mechanical engineering, pull up the German equivalent of that, and do a one-to-one match, module by module, outcome by outcome, competence by competence. And at the end, you would get an overview, which is a gap. And what that means is that you would get what's called a deficit Bescheid in German, which is basically your deficit between your qualification and India. And it's all a bit complicated, and it is, and that's partly a German issue. But the outcome is that you have a gap. And when you come to Germany, you get your visa, you come to Germany, you have to do an additional training program to bridge that gap, which could be anything from 6 weeks to a year, maybe even longer. And once you complete that, you then get fully recognized as an equivalent in terms of your competency and skills to do that job, and are equivalent to someone from Germany, the German education system, and there's a complete harmonization. So again, it comes and starts from the recognition of university, recognition of curriculum, gap analysis of that curriculum, and so on. So point being from showing this is that in order for India to really take those steps truly globally across multiple sectors in industry, there needs to be this process of further recognition of universities and further recognition of qualifications, or alignment of curriculum and qualifications as well. So India's taken big steps, and I'm not the biggest expert in the room, I'm sure, about the national education policy that was recently launched by Prime Minister Modi. But hugely interesting in terms of the different topics that have been addressed in this new national educational policy. And I've picked out, I think, the 8 for me of the kind of highlights that I think are very, very interesting. In general, I think it's all moving absolutely in the right direction. You've got the pedagogical shift, so practical and problem-solving approach to learning. You've got an assessment approach, which is really changing everything from being to a problem-solving and not memorization approach to learning. More focus on languages, curriculum shift, so again focused on skills, and importantly multidisciplinary knowledge. So it's valuable across different sectors to enable people to switch from one sector, one career to another, because their skill sets are multidisciplinary. Technology integration, making it accessible to the wider Indian population and making it more effective use of that. Increasing teacher quality, having vocational focus to make students, or bring more awareness of industry requirements to students, and harmonizing and bringing more regulation to the higher educational landscape. And if you look at the challenges I mentioned before, pretty much all of them have been addressed in this new economic policy. Yeah? So more harmonization for higher education, more technology, more of a problem-solving approach and skill-based approach to curriculum. And if you look at that, the global university rankings, teacher quality is one component to that, or teacher quality and ratios. And teacher quality is also outlined here as one of the key drivers of the new national education policy. So everything seems to be moving very much in the right direction. If you look at the Indian talent ecosystem, there's been so much going on. And I think that, again, one of the key factors in India, which is the opportunity and the challenge, is quality versus quantity. So India has a massive population. It's never, ever going to be easy, or anywhere near easy, to roll out educational programs to 500 million people. Yeah. So if you're looking at that sector, and there are lots of things going on to make it better. So you've got international collaborations, lots of investment, foreign investments are coming into the sector to help drive development from the grassroots up. You've got digitization, Diksha, which is a teacher trainer digitalization program, and others, lots of international players that are bringing international education digitally online to India, also bridging that gap from international mismatch. You've got one of the world's most booming edtech landscapes, so startup landscapes, again booming through COVID, obviously having a bit of a recoil now, so there's lots of shifting and changing going on, but huge opportunity and an understanding of that opportunity of using digital technology to reach volumes of people also is something that obviously is becoming more and more relevant in India. Skill-based education, NSDC, Skill India, PMKVY. Again, we've done a lot of work with NSDC, with the National Skills Development Corporation. I've worked with them for many years, from rolling out training centers in Rajasthan, for example, to working with the oil and gas sector to train people at really grassroots level, all the way through to where we work with them now, which is NSDC International, looking to really differentiate talent that's being developed for international opportunities. And again, the challenge there is the task for NSDC is to train 500 million people. And that differentiation, it's not for everybody. 500 million people won't be able to work abroad. It's not for everybody, but that distinction between international opportunities, domestic opportunities, and skilling throughout the educational pyramid from grassroots up to PhDs and so on, there's work to be done throughout that journey. I mentioned the national education policy already, but basically everything's moving in the right direction. And the question is how to tap into this at speed and how to ensure consistency of quality without focusing too much on quantity. And that's something that is always at the heart of the Indian challenge, just because of the sheer numbers that are operating. Foreign investment and development initiatives, as I said, there is a more and more open environment in India. It's something that was really challenging in the past. It's still not easy. We've opened up an office in Bangalore. It's not the easiest thing in the world to still open up a foreign company in India. It's getting better, but it's still pretty complicated. I've also been filling in forms today and websites that crash multiple times to try and get my director's signature and so on. So always challenges, and the opportunity to improve it is there, but it's opening. And I think that a lot of that is driven by some of the big industry sectors that have invested heavily in India, and particularly in the IT space. So Google, Microsoft, Apple, and so on have invested heavily in India and built strong teams in India that are benefiting from this young, skilled talent pool, and that filters through. So that investment filters through not just from people who are working at these organizations, but in the subsidiary sectors, the industries that feed into the supply chain of these companies, and naturally into education as well. So it's a natural push to get jobs. This is what you've got to do. Industry is here, they are hiring, this is what they want, and go for it. Likewise, foreign education initiatives, many of them have been popping up. I've got some examples from Europe here with the Erasmus program, which is basically focused on developing youth for education and sports in Europe, has expanded its programs to include India. Different institutions and academic organizations that have also set up opportunities to partner with, develop, and grow education within India. And then numerous government initiatives. So I won't go into all of them, but numerous government initiatives, which are all focused on supporting India and tapping into this demographic opportunity, but also bring more economic equivalence into India as well, and so on. So I think from my perspective, if you look at the talent supply challenges and balanced growth, so there are some interesting factors here that I've put at the top. So when you look at foreign remittance into India, a number of developing economies really rely heavily on the GDP impact that foreign remittance gives into the country. And if you look at India, again, it's dropped a bit because of COVID, but you're looking at the 3 to 5% mark of GDP that comes from foreign remittance. So it's not negligible. and there's an opportunity for it to grow, but it's also not one of the major drivers of GDP in the country if you compare that to services or agriculture or industry, for example. And in comparison to a country like the Philippines has been anywhere from 13 or 14% of GDP to where it is today, which is 6 or 7%. So even there, in comparison to similar type demographics that look to send people abroad, India doesn't rely on it as much. So there's still opportunity without impacting growth domestically as well. India has the largest pool of startups in the world. I think that's fascinating. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a startup guy. So I think from that side, I think it's very interesting. And that comes from twofold, which feeds into the opportunities and challenges below. A lot of startups in India are naturally grown. Yeah, educated people who may struggle to find work in India set up their own company. Yeah, and there's a big focus in this new education policy and in India in general in facilitating entrepreneurship as one of the key economic drivers of the country. And startups come from knowledge and information. And a lot of that can come, for example, from Indians that have been working overseas, have seen something happen in the US, for example, and said, hold on a minute, this is a tremendous opportunity for India. Go back home to India, set up a startup and make the next unicorn billion dollar business, or a niche business that feeds into certain sectors of the economy. So also extremely important, and changing demographics and talent movement also has an impact on knowledge and creativity for startups as well, which is so important to the Indian economy. And the service sector, again, 54% or so GDP. There are different numbers that I've seen over the last few years. Again, particularly because of business process outsourcing in the IT sector is so strong for the Indian economy, and is only going to continue to be strong as well. So with these kind of key things, which are driven by either foreign companies driving growth in the service sector, or Indians moving abroad and sending money home, or from knowledge exchange and growth in startups, there is a sort of pro and con, opportunity challenge mindset in terms of this talent opportunity globally. The opportunity, of course, there's more jobs, there's more income, there are more skills available, more knowledge sharing, a stronger international presence, which is always a good thing for India in terms of general economy, as you know, the host of the G20 and so on. All of this is great publicity for India, which has one of the world's strongest growing economies at the moment and will continue to do so. Visibility of talent and Indian talent internationally is a great thing for that continued growth. And then rather than brain drain, which is a challenge, you have brain circulation, which kind of compiles all of these different opportunities and shows this circular route to continuing to bring knowledge from abroad, from India to abroad, and from abroad back to India as well. There are challenges, so brain drain, top talent getting paid more abroad and leaving gaps in the Indian economy. There's a lot of issues that are historical, but unfortunately still there, particularly in the blue and grey collar sector, of manipulative recruitment. Promising someone a job somewhere, it doesn't materialize. That can be the UK, Middle East, or other countries as well. Talent poaching, domestic growth impact, limitations to entrepreneurship because you do take some of the leading talent out, and also cultural integration as well. So I think what I've gone through is kind of an overview of what's going on, and a lot of, before I get onto this last slide, there's a lot of maybe a couple of examples, and I'll just step back into this slide. A couple of examples. So we do a lot of work with Germany, and people assume, international migration, it's Australia, it's Japan, it's Canada, it's the US, it's Germany, and so on. But what's really changing is there are a lot more economies that are coming into that same space. If you look in Germany, in Europe, for example, Poland has major requirements for skill now, and less language requirements because they're more open to English language as being a primary. We have a big opportunity in Hungary, for example, at the moment, where Hungary is becoming an automotive, is becoming more of an automotive powerhouse in Europe in terms of the entire end-to-end supply chain for the automotive industry, and is investing heavily in that. But they have a gap of 250,000 people over the next 4 years to make that that vision of being an automotive powerhouse come to reality. So there are many, many countries that are facing the same challenges that aren't even talked about yet in terms of the global landscape of skill requirements. So moving on to closing the talent gap, and I've got a couple of slides left. So what you see here is basically what we do, and rather than a pitch of, I know this is our business, this is basically a process that takes into consideration all the challenges and opportunities that have been addressed before. So what we do at CertifID is we pool talent. So we pool talent from a recruiting perspective. So we work with universities, we work with NSDC, we work with big industry leaders like Apollo in healthcare, for example. We work with the sector skill councils and many others to pool talent specific to certain sectors, healthcare, automotive, logistics, and so on, and feed them into a development funnel. And that development funnel basically does a number of things that was mentioned before. So it looks at skill matching, it looks at developing relevant harmonized CVs and video CVs that are relevant to the German and European market. It looks at initial introduction to cultural awareness of living and working in a different country and introducing people to new languages. It looks at, importantly, skill assessment. So it really looks at, you say you have this skill or this qualification, can you back it up by doing a skill assessment and showcasing the skills that you have? And all of this feeds into a digital skill wallet, what we call Skill Pass, which in principle, without going into full details, is used through machine learning to match German employer requirements for jobs, which are skill-based requirements, with talent, and then presenting the roadmap to get that talent to Germany. So what's the visa process, automating a number of those different processes, recognition of qualifications, translation of documents, language training, and so on, to facilitate in as quick a time as possible the ability for that talent to go from country A to country B, India to Germany, for example, across a number of different sectors. And all of this is driven on those requirements of the employer. I want transparency on the qualification. I want to know what skills somebody has. I want to know if they're going to be able to fit into my organization and my organizational culture, and how quickly they can get here and be an asset to my organization. And by using technology and working with the Indian educational ecosystem, we're bridging that gap faster than anybody else, which ensures that there's this new opportunity for, again, particularly healthcare, logistics, and engineering talent to get to Germany faster, or to build an awareness of what it would be like to work in Germany faster. So taking all those different components and bringing them together. And this is what we do, again, across multiple sectors: healthcare, logistics, IT, automotive, and hospitality, and others coming on board, building this valuable pool of skill-verified professionals that have an opportunity to go and work overseas and work abroad. So I think that's my presentation. I think there are some questions. Dr. Nagendra, I'm happy to hand back to you to facilitate that. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Tim. Absolutely interesting. I think it's like, preaching to the preached kind of thing at the end of the day, but absolutely interesting perspective from where you are and with your lens. I think there are quite a few questions, but given the paucity of time, I think we will have a few questions being related to you. The first question is from Mr. Roshan. His question is, how about job opportunities for Indian sales and marketing professionals abroad? Thank you, Roshan.
Yeah, so I think there are an awful lot of opportunities. Yeah, so I think the challenge with sales and marketing is obviously the impact of things like AI. Yeah, so what technology has as an impact into those sectors. I think there is a lot of movement to work with companies in India to provide sales and marketing solutions to companies around the world. So that's one. And there are opportunities for executives to move internationally as well. I think it's the same topic. You need the right language skills. So if you want to do sales and marketing in Germany, you can take a qualification that is specific to the German market. And if you can showcase your German language skills, also beneficial. UK and so on is obviously a much easier route in terms of language, but there's plenty of opportunity across the board in different sectors, especially also sales and marketing.
Now, this is a second question coming from one of the participants, Tim. His question is, would it be a good idea to, for example, let's say, now we have, like, because you work with a lot of Indian universities or, training institutions, or maybe even NSDC, and they come in a different flavor altogether. But his question is that, would it be a good idea to, showcase to the Indian students when they are doing their graduation? Because in India, we call this a UG, and the masters, we call this a PG kind of thing. Either at the, largely at UG level, that's undergraduation level, would it be a good idea to let them know as to what kind of skill or training or certification required in case they're applying for any specific countries? For example, let's say they're applying for, let's say, engineering jobs in Germany or in Australia or in Hungary or in Poland or in Czech, whichever country. So I'm sure each country will have its own requirement, right? So would it be a good idea to actually expose them to at that level? So therefore, along with the studies, they actually prepare them.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, as I said, I think there's a huge movement towards skill-based hiring. Yeah, so I think the degree or the UG or PG is a baseline requirement rather than the frontline, requirement plus experience. It's really skill-based. And if you look at a lot of the job advertisements in Europe, for example, now it's really linked to skills. Yeah, so you need a degree, tick the box, yes. But the main thing that's going to get you the job is do you have the certain skills that are required? And the main reason for that is industry is moving so quickly. So the skill sets are changing constantly. It's not, the degree is not changing. The baseline skill sets of a degree aren't necessarily changing, but the specific skills of industry are. I think the second point to say there as an example is with, again, the IT sector. So the IT sector, do you have a degree in computer engineering? Okay, kind of important. But the reality is, are you a Java coder, and how good are you at that? Or can you do Python? Or, these are the skill sets that are absolutely required. And if you've got an industry certification from Microsoft or Oracle or AWS or so on and so on, that's almost more valuable than your degree. And that's what's changed so much in the IT sector is industry-driven, skill-based certification has a tremendous value because it's relevant to industry today and not outdated.
Thank you. The next question is from Mr. Vinod, and his question is, how about opportunities for SCM and purchasing in Germany? Thank you, Vinod.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a huge gap in that space. So in SCM and logistics in general, there is a huge gap. So we're doing a lot with the Logistics Sector Council in India. They're a great partner and very forward thinking in terms of bridging skills gaps in the logistics sector. Without a doubt, huge opportunity. I think the likes of Bosch and other companies are already working towards aggregating demand for professionals in the logistics sector, and SCM in particular, especially technology-driven solutions in that space. I think there's a tremendous opportunity for Indian talent to work in that area, and it's growing. And the other thing is, because it's more tech-driven, in my opinion, language is less important. So a lot of the sectors are also very open to working with English language as a primary. For example, German being a benefit, but it's definitely a booming sector at the moment.
A follow-up question to what Vinod asked, a very generic question, Tim, is that if any one of our participants want to explore opportunities in Germany, how do you think, or do you suggest they should be going about? Because all of them are from some of the best institutions, some of them are from IIT, some of them are IIMs, and they have wonderful work experience, and then they are in the process of building additional skill set, the kind of training that they're seeking as of today. So if anyone wants to explore in one of the areas, how do you suggest that they should go about in reaching out to you, or your company can help them do that?
Yeah. So of course, without doubt, feel free to reach out to me or our company, talentsure.io or certified.com. We're happy to get in touch. But in general, I think there are a lot of job platforms in Germany that aren't specifically looking for international talent, but would provide a pretty good idea of the type of opportunities there are in Germany at the moment. Yeah. So, and even there, the job post may be in German, but of course, with Google Translate and so on, it's very easy to get an understanding of what the requirements are for these different sectors. So in general, I think that would be the way I would suggest. Yeah, is either you find a specific job you would be interested in, and understand that requirement and then say, contact us and say, how would I go about getting this job? Or having a general look at the market and understanding the requirements that are there, and then positioning your CV, your qualifications and so on in a manner that represents the skill requirement of those jobs. And again, with the skill being a focus. I think another connected point to that is your CV. Yeah, so there's obviously a lot of talk about CVs and so on. In general, keep it short, keep it concise, keep it skill-based. Yeah, and there are platforms like Europass, for example, where you can create a European standardized CV template, which I think is also valuable. Because again, if you're an employer and you get 10 CVs and they're all completely different, it's extremely difficult to even start. And quite honestly, what would probably happen is you look at the one that you know in terms of a format, you look at that one and the rest you kind of put on the side, and you may miss the opportunity to find the right candidate. So I think that harmonization of CV with the right skills in the right place that make the right statement is also very important as well.
Very valid, absolutely. This is a question from Mr. Krishnakant Malviya, and his question is, in case we aspire to work as a global professional, what sort of educational program or skill building we should opt for? Thank you, Krishnakant.
Yeah, so for sure, getting a stronger degree, undergraduate degree as possible is very relevant. And I think that two things that I would suggest. Yeah, so when we're looking to, for example, hire engineering as an example candidates for the German market, the normal requirement is you have a degree and 2 years experience. So I think the experience is still, I mean, I'm not talking rocket science here, yeah, but I think that getting that couple of years experience is very valuable, especially if you can tie that experience down to skills. And then the final bit I would say is continue to learn. Don't just stop. Yeah, so look for an internationally recognized online qualification program. I would suggest really getting one that is industry recognized, so not just getting a Coursera generic program with certain skills and a Coursera certificate at the end of it. Look at seeing if you can find an industry recognized qualification. And for example, if you want to go to Germany, find a German one. Yeah? Or if you want to go to the US, find a US one, for example. That then is really skill driven. So the outcome then is like on a LinkedIn profile, you have your qualification and then you have your skills. And those skills can be verified with this qualification and add tremendous value above and beyond your degree.
Good. I think we are almost hitting, we just 2 minutes short of 7 o'clock in India, Tim. So I have a last question. So I think because I think quite some time, you're talking about Germany and also, you have quite, a few examples from India as well. But broadly, I think one of the slides, you're talking about where in India, we have about 50% of GDP coming from service. And I think that must be really contrasting as far as Germany is concerned, where quite a lot of has got to be from manufacturing in Germany vis-a-vis in India. So I think that's a kind of what you say, the difference that you get to see between these two countries. Of course, the rest as well. So from that perspective, Tim, so what would be your suggestion for somebody like for both the countries or people working in any of these countries to focus more on manufacturing, because manufacturing creates a different ecosystem altogether, because for every one company that you set up or factory that you set up, then you're multiplying or you're accelerating the job opportunities. But whereas the service, it is just there, it is, it can, you don't, create that accelerating ecosystem there. So therefore, from your perspective, which is more important? I mean, in India, I think fortunately we are doing an okay kind of a balancing act has been there happening for quite some time. But in some countries, especially in Europe, like you said, either they have been purely manufacturing or a service industry, very few service, but largely manufacturing. But in India, fortunately, like I said, it's a nice balancing act. But from your perspective, what would be your ideal combination, if at all, if there is one?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I think again, looking at Germany to start with, yeah. So Germany is driven by what's called the Mittelstand, which is a small and medium companies. Yeah, so companies between 300 and 1,000 people. They drive the German economy, and the big factor in those manufacturing areas is digitalization. Yeah, so it really is digital is at the core of every transition in every company in Germany, which is actually quite backward compared to many others, yeah, in terms of its digitalization capacity. So I think from my perspective, service sector and manufacturing, it's something a bridge between. Yeah, so India has this huge opportunity because of its awareness of digital. Yeah, so digital, IT, technology, and service, and basically all companies, all machines are becoming digital machines. Yeah, there's a big transition and shift, which I think is a real opportunity. Yeah, so if you're bridging an engineering degree with a technology degree, that's the sweet spot, right? And which is sort of bridging service and manufacturing. I think there's a sweet spot there. I think, CNC machining and tooling and all this kind of stuff, absolutely, there's still a requirement. But if you can bridge that requirement with being able to operate a machine digitally or remotely, or digital twins and mechatronics and so on, then you're really hitting this sweet spot of opportunity to be relevant in both economies. Yeah, or in multiple economies, not just in Germany. So that would be, I guess, my take is it needs to be a marriage between the two.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tim, and absolute pleasure having you, and with such a very global perspectives. I'm sure all of our participants must have enjoyed, and I'm sure some of them might reach out to you for if there is any inclination to seek out any opportunities either in Germany or anywhere in the world. But from all of us at TimesPro, on behalf of all of our participants, thank you so much for your time. And next time when you're in India, we'll be more than happy to host you. I'm sure if you're visiting one of your offices, either in Bangalore or in Bombay, please do let us know. We'll be more than happy to host you and your team as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for the questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks.